medical tyranny and the fight for justice. Well, g'day there, and g'day if you watch this video internationally as well. What scenes we saw in Australia today, in Victoria, just incredible. And in fact, the medical tyranny, the situation of the lockdowns, the coerced nature of these COVID injections has seen some Australians become very upset and take to the streets, which has led to some very, very ugly scenes. And we'll be discussing them tonight with my guest, Susan Walters. Susan is Infected Blood Australia's best letter writer ever and has become a really good person for our group, a really wise person. And the conversation tonight should be really interesting. So I'm just going to accept his Sue now. Hello, everyone. As we wait for Sue, and we go, remember, tonight we're discussing medical tyranny. G'day, Sue.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
I'm doing much better than when I spoke to you earlier. I've had more medicine, such is life. When you have a chronic condition and you're a victim of Australia's deadliest medical scandal and cover-up. But Sue, g'day, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I think what most people don't understand, Charles, is that people affected by Hep C, whether through being a haemophiliac or through blood transfusions, they don't realise that we are living with chronic diseases. You know, it's a daily battle to get out of bed and function. And, you know, for the energy that you expend, you know, preparing and going on with these Instagram posts, you know, it's really, you know, exhausting the limited amount of energy that you've got during a day. And I think most people watching probably don't realise how truly sick everyone appearing on here really is, you know.
Yeah.
They just, oh, there's another person, you know, nothing wrong with them. They go down the street, no broken arm, no broken leg, you know, move on, nothing to see here, you know. But it really is a daily struggle for everyone who's been affected by this absolute, you know, absolute crime. I think the best way forward is just to seek justice, you know. We need help. We need legal help and we need assistance. There's so many people who are chronically ill that may be on a disability pension and are struggling to pay their rent, struggling to pay for food, let alone, you know, $200 and $300 worth of medical and medicine every month from the pharmacy or, you know, from the health shop.
More.
You know, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, well, Sue, this is good. So I'll just say hello to everyone as they join. I'll just say tonight we're going to talk about these medical tyrants. We're going to have a chat about medical tyranny and the fight for justice, how we're going to get justice against what's happened. And this is for victims of Australia's deadliest medical scandal. Okay, but right now around Australia, there's a real feeling that maybe public health has lost its way. Now, maybe there are people out there that agree with some of what's been going on, but not all of what's going on. I don't think I've met too many people who are in agreement with all of what's been going on. And there's been some coercion and we've seen some ugly scenes. Now, I did promise for the international viewers, I did promise tonight that I would play something, and I'm going to play it if you don't mind, Sue. And then we're going to talk about the effect of what, you know, public health, what has happened to public health in Australia. But here we go. So this is from Melbourne today, if you can see it. Scenes of the city. A man approaching a car. He's suddenly attacked by soldiers and beaten to the ground. Soldiers come out and everyone's told to get away. Okay, well, there's that scene there. Now, perhaps I don't know the full full details of what was happening there, so I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the authorities perhaps on that one. But I will say this: if those were soldiers, to that soldier that assaulted that civilian, see that sword there? That was someone who actually served their country and served Australia and did the right thing. And the difference is that they know in uniform, especially, unless you're drunk, you don't get in fights with civilians. So when you're actually fighting civilians, getting out of a vehicle and bashing somebody and the rest of us see it, you've crossed the line. Don't ever do that again. You're no soldier. What you are is some sort of, I don't know, a scumbag. So that was very disappointing. And now this, Sue, this is from this Shrine of Remembrance. I'll just rewind that actually. Do you know, Sue, I found that hard to even hold up. I mean, not physically, fortunately, although I would normally, but I actually found it hard to hold up and show everybody because I just couldn't believe what was going on. What are your thoughts? This is at the Shrine.
I think it's a terribly bad look for the police in the first instance, you know, to have basically armoured terrorist response vehicles driving down the streets of Melbourne when people are protesting, whether legally or illegally. I'm sure there are far better ways to manage crowds than what we've seen. And you would think that given riots in America and the ones in England years ago, that surely the police forces in this country should have learnt lessons from what's happened overseas and adopted a far better way of managing these situations that are occurring. To have police officers stand, well, one, to have police officers, you know, throw men and women to the ground for whatever reason, 3 and 4 or 5 officers around one person, and then for the other officers that are standing around crowd controlling to actually stand in front of people videoing this. My question is, if you are doing the right thing, if you are following all the protocols and rules and procedures with any sort of stop and search or whatever they call it, surely if you're doing your job in the correct manner, you would not mind being filmed by anybody, because that would provide evidence to support you in your case against that individual. You know, to actually physically stand in front of people, bystanders who are recording these images, really sends a bad look. You know, it's not good for any police or security force.
Well, no, the death of George Floyd rightly caused outrage in the United States and around the world, right? There is, but what I saw with that I think it was a 74-year-old lady in Victoria, the police were coming along and a younger police are there and they threw this woman to the ground. And then when she's on the ground, they then took pepper spray to her face directly as a woman in her 70s. I've never seen anything like that. That's the worst judgment I've ever seen. I mean, police have done bad things. I mean, police can kill. They've got firearms in Australia. For those internationally, this is no joke. We get very nervous when we see our police behaving like this because, you know, who knows how far they'll take it. And you've seen, if you've been watching, how far they'll take it currently in Victoria. And in New South Wales, they've done some strange things as well. You know, Sue, this thing with the mask, you know, this mask mandate, right? Now, I really want to bring this up because I've done some videos to try and show my opposition to the mask mandate, how ridiculous it is. I've spent decades studying viruses. I've had a lot to do with viruses, actually. I've run a group full of people who acquired viruses from the government supplying a contaminated blood supply. But this mask business, what's happened is, obviously I have an exemption, and people would say to me when they'd see me wear masks outside, why are you wearing them? And I said, well, actually, I'll tell you why. Because I've had so many situations where I've been accosted and it just, the arguments have been ridiculous. I was in a shop once in a supermarket where, get this is actually today this happened. In the past I was there, I was asked twice. After I said I've got an exemption, I was then presented with a mask twice by this guy after saying I've got an exemption. And he said, he held out once. I said, would you like to talk to my doctor? Then he held it again. I said, would you like to talk to my lawyer? Okay, and only then did he back away. today I went to that same supermarket and I didn't wear a mask because I'd forgotten, and I thought, oh, bloody hell, this is ridiculous. And anyway, I struggle to breathe from my right side because I can't get enough energy in my right side to lift my lung. So I go in there and I thought all's good. I actually made a video. Oh, look, I'm not being harassed. Everyone was wearing masks, wouldn't be harassed. Well, when I got to the cash register, the guy at the cash register basically wouldn't ask for a bag, and he wouldn't hear me. I asked for a bag about 3 times. He wouldn't hear me. And I noticed he'd been staring at me when I was in the store. So then he eventually gets me the bag, and then half the items he doesn't put in the bag. So I've got to put it in the bag. And I had to say to him, you know, I don't think much of your customer service. So we had a little bit of an altercation because the guy's a younger guy, and I don't appreciate that sort of behaviour when I'm a paying customer. And this is Australia. And they may have imported some some strange Chinese social credit score to deal with people like me, disabled people, that we are given a bad time when we're in supermarkets. But again, I don't like it, and I'm Australian. And Sue, this medical tyranny, they're getting police to beat up civilians, and they're getting what look to be soldiers to betray their country, betray their flag, and act like absolute scum. And it's all for this virus, COVID-19. So for those people who are believers, perhaps, in the government's approach, okay, fair enough. But I'll just say this. What about the infected blood scandal? There are tens of thousands of Australians, okay, in the 20th century that were given contaminated blood transfusions. Why are they not listed anywhere? Why is it that there's never been an investigation, a legal investigation? They've happened in every other country in the world. Why is it that our public broadcaster refuses to investigate? Why are we living under this medical tyranny, believing that it's all about a virus, when they know there's thousands of people who've got Hep C? They won't admit to it. They won't speak about it. You know, Sue, they won't even tell the public that anyone who's been transfused before, say, the late 90s should go and get tested for hepatitis C. And yet they're doing this to us. What do you think, Sue?
Well, I think the interesting thing with COVID is there's a number of issues that I'd like to raise. One is the COVID tracing and, you know, the COVID check-in, the QR codes. You know, basically most to be very few people that don't have a modern phone with, you know, smartphone technology. So we're being tracked regardless by Google and whoever else. Our phones are monitored and tracked, okay? And that's a given. The second thing is we don't need QR codes if that's happening. And the third thing is, with all the lockdown, and I know you in Sydney are still in lockdown, and we've just come out of it here, or tomorrow night we're coming out of lockdown, but we are allowed to go shopping in a supermarket, provided we wear a mask, okay? You go into any major supermarket, there could be 100 people in there. Now, you're not allowed to go and visit. I know a lot of people live at single households, you know, but you're not allowed to go and visit an 84-year-old neighbour who's on his own, you know, and take him a meal or keep him company for an hour, or, you know, so on. Yet I can drive him to medical appointments, you know. So to me, the mental health effects of these rules in this lockdown and in this COVID situation are absolutely geared towards isolating people and families, and that has a massive effect on everyone's social and community interactions. And, you know, if you could tell me that if I go out and my likelihood of catching COVID at the moment is, you know, X%, that's something that I would take on board, and I would make a decision for my health and my family's health, you know, whether I wanted to go out and not have a vaccine or not be masked or so on. But the fact is, they play with the numbers so carefully that, you know, it's not until we're nearly 18 months into this pandemic where they're actually releasing data from a year ago that shows that most people that have died of COVID are elderly with comorbidity problems. So it's not the COVID that takes them, it's something else that they've had already. The COVID's just an exacerbated issue. So for me, the number of we've had far more suicides since lockdown than we've had COVID deaths, and it
Yeah.
just doesn't get reported, you know.
Yeah.
If that's not a medical emergency, I don't know what is.
I absolutely. That's like something out of a horror film. What's happening around the world? Please, if you're watching, if you're listening to Sue, that was so well put, Sue. I'm so glad that you're in our group. I really am, because we need. I mean, we've got lots of smart people, but we've all been so hit by this virus, hepatitis C. There are tens of thousands of Australians who are infected with the deadly virus, hepatitis C. Now, here's the thing. Today, if you're infected with hepatitis C, they could rapidly get you antiviral treatments and knock it out. And it's quite likely that you might not have any long-term harmful effects, or you could be sick. But the long-term situation might be pretty, it should be pretty good. But 30 years ago, and in the 1980s, hepatitis C was a really serious thing. And in fact, I think it was the US Chief Surgeon General Health. I've got that muddled up, but the Surgeon General, we can find the quote. He actually said of hepatitis C that in the 90s, this is bigger, that could be bigger than HIV, and it is. It's more complex, and it's certainly more pervasive, and it was certainly more pervasive in the blood supply. And this hepatitis C, this was in the blood supply right throughout the 20th century. Okay, and we know, we can prove that authorities around the world, they did the wrong thing. Okay, authorities in Canada did the wrong thing. It was exposed by a legal inquiry. Ireland the same, and now the UK by this inquiry, the infected blood inquiry in the UK. But here in Australia, no one knows, because the government is engaged in cover-up. This same government, we've had a blood scandal here too. And for people internationally, you know there was a global contaminated blood scandal. And if you're shocked by the scenes today, think about this. Think about how our group was fighting this government, these governments, for decades to get the things, to get the answers, and get the help that you taxpayers got in your respective countries, in Canada, in Ireland, in Japan, the list goes on, and now in the United Kingdom. And here we are in Australia, and we've got Greg Ball, who's watching tonight. Greg Ball, right? Here we are in Australia. Greg Ball has the bleeding disorder, haemophilia. If he was in Canada, he would have been compensated. They did the wrong thing by haemophiliacs there, but even so, he had been compensated almost 30 years ago. He would have been on a huge financial assistance, up to about $300,000 with disability, and with financial assistance for his infection, which he's cleared, but has had cancer 3 times because of it. About 300,000, a significant amount for the last almost 20 years. And in Australia, he gets zero, no support, no help, no answers. He can't even get the company, CSL, that made this medical product that gave him the hepatitis C to tell him which batch was contaminated. And this company, CSL, are the makers of the AZ jab, which they are also indemnified for, just like they were legally indemnified for the product that gave Greg his liver cancer and hepatitis C. And here we are, and this is Australia.
I think it's a very sad situation, and I think what most people don't know, the general public don't know, they see this as something that's happened, 30 odd years ago, in 35 or 37 years ago. And they believe that any injustice would have been rectified by now. Now, what we had was men, women and children, haemophiliacs, patients in hospitals who were given infected blood and plasma and other blood products. They were then never told that the product they were given contained hepatitis C or HIV. A lot of people who received blood from these sources, and I'm particularly talking about accident victims and surgical victims who receive contaminated blood, a lot of them only found out that they had hepatitis C was, one, when they're going to donate blood back to the Red Cross, or two, when a doctor's, 10 years, 12, 15 years down the track decided that your liver's not functioning very well, we better check it out. Now, we've got COVID tracing for COVID-19, okay? They trace, and we're spending millions of dollars tracing where these people have been, who they've been in contact with, every Tom, Dick and Harry. But you take a case where a woman's given infected blood in hospital, Okay, she goes to donate blood 10 years later and is told she has hepatitis C. Never been a drug user, prostitute, all that sort of thing. So the health department contact her and say, you've got a notifiable disease. Okay, big shock to that person. It's a notifiable disease. Your name's on a register. Okay, but when they ask the questions, do you shoot up drugs at home and all this sort of stuff, and the person says no, they dropped the investigation. They did not want to trace where that blood came from. Now, if that doesn't give you the answer of where it came from just from their refusal to further investigate, you know, to me, that stinks of corruption, collusion and cover-up.
Everybody watching internationally, if you ask why Australia never, because Canada and America and France, even the Middle East and the United Kingdom and Ireland, if you wonder, we've been like, I'll say the equivalent of that Land of the Lost or whatever it is, you know, the tainted blood version, Lost Horizon or whatever. Here we are in Australia with a lost tainted blood scandal, right? And let me tell you something to the world. I've been fighting this for decades, right? For 30 years. And the biggest area, Sue, if there's one big area, everybody, please, if I was to drop dead tonight, the malfeasance in the area of the look back, which is this system where they were supposed to trace people who've been given contaminated blood. Yes, there may be a cover up, but for victims, they said that the public doesn't know, but that they told victims they'd do a look back. Well, listen, my mate Jay, in his part of his last conversation with me, he mentioned look back. Okay. Now, he was upset because he'd been frustrated by them. Now, this was in 2017. For goodness sake, he was infected as a child, in 1979, 1980, for goodness sake. And again, in decades, it's just outrageous. And, but basically the searching for people, for example, I did a study years ago asking a cohort of 100 of our members who were good enough to respond to a survey. And this is almost 20 years ago, and it found, it's called the Look Back Report, and it's available on our website, infectedbloodaustralia.com. And it basically found that no one had been contacted by this look back system. We had a meeting where we had all the victims. They said, no one told me. I found out through failing health, or I found out through this reason, or this accident, or this thing, or every story the same, every single one. This happened to children. It happened to women. The cruelest thing, Sue, of the lot, the cruelest thing that I ever saw in the whole thing. And actually, I feel like wringing the necks, and I don't want to say that because they'll probably have the police bash down the door and then shoot me with a rubber bullet or something. But when I first started, there were a lot of women that I'd do radio interviews or something, and they'd find out about the group, had a different name then. It was Tainted Blood Product Action Group. And what would happen is they'd contact me, and they were women who'd received blood transfusions during childbirth. Okay? And then what had happened was, after they'd had the transfusion, for months, and then for years, sadly, they'd had a whole host of strange and wonderful symptoms. And this is the most shocking thing, I have to say. The haemophilia side is pure horror. I've spoken about it, and Greg Ball's been kind enough to come on. And we've had some wonderful haemophiliacs in our group who've no longer here, and they're friends of mine. And it's been misery. But the women getting it through childbirth, these are women who were sometimes given this blood to speed up recovery. Now, that was the wrong thing to do. And it was known that pretty much from 1970, I think a very famous Australian haematologist, his name escapes me for the moment, but he was saying that really that was the wrong use. Should only be used in life and death circumstance, right? And then there are other women who have ectopic pregnancies and they did require blood, okay? So this is what we had. I had all these women coming in, and they'd been mothers who'd received blood, and they'd now, years later, found out why they had these weird and wonderful symptoms. This is after their marriages had failed, after their parents, their husbands or partners had called them, half a partner, half a parent, because they weren't so energetic with the children. And then after losing their marriages and their jobs and everything, they find out that they have Hep C. and they lost like 10, 15 years in a nightmare of not knowing what was wrong with them. That has to be the worst thing. What the government did to those women, I think people need to go to jail for that. I really, really do.
Well, I think even today, Charles, we've got people who are seriously ill, you know, would not get a job today based on their health because they can't maintain a regular sleep pattern. They can't, you know, concentrate. They have, you know, brain fog and all that sort of stuff. Plus other physical issues related to their conditions, not just the Hep C. And if you've had Hep C and you've been treated and it's cleared through your system, well and good, but that's not the be all and end all. You're left, many people, and I would say nearly 100%, I'll take a guess, that nearly 100% of people who have had Hep C and had it cleared through their system, through treatment, now have 1, 2, 3 or 4 other issues that some of them completely left field, out of the blue issues, like, you know, an anaphylaxis to an unknown cause, you know, like that. And I think what people out there don't understand is that although this happened 35, 40 years ago, up until the end of the 2000s, there are a limited number of people, luckily still alive, who technically should have been dead, except for this new treatment that came out in 2016. Now, that treatment saved so many lives of all people affected with hepatitis C, no matter how you contracted it. However, if people our age can think back to Bryce Courtenay, the Australian author, and his book April Fool's Day, which was written in memory of his beloved son Damon, who was a haemophiliac, who was given infected blood and died at a very young age. I can't recall, I think it was maybe 24 or something, really sad, very young age. Now, people out there probably think, oh, well, that's all done and dusted 30 years ago. You know, whoever got hurt got compensation. They would have sued. This is what we're thinking, okay? The average person in Australia thinks, okay, those people who were the victims of a crime or negligence, there's an avenue, a legal recourse to sue and get compensation, okay, for the injury suffered. However, that's not the case for most contaminated blood victims. We have been left high and dry. Okay, no solicitor wants to touch it. They won't take it on as a pro bono case, even though the evidence is there, particularly someone like Greg Ball and his family. The evidence that's there is a cut and dried case of pure negligence, if not attempted murder in my book. If I walk down the street and you're out walking and I stabbed you with a needle full of HIV and hepatitis C, I would be arrested, tried and imprisoned. Now, because it's a CSL, Red Cross, a hospital, nothing's happened. Not one person held accountable.
Yeah, well, they did it multiple times. They reinfected and reinfected and reinfected. I've seen the evidence. Greg Ball knows it's the truth. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous criminal behaviour.
And as individuals who are ill, you're told to then go and find the evidence yourself. You know, you're barely able to get out of bed. You know, you mightn't even be able to walk to the letterbox. You know, you're that sick. So you're then told to go and find the evidence yourself and launch a court case. Now, when you do, if you do try and find that evidence and you do go to look back, which is just basically a smokescreen, no one that I know who's approached look back has ever had a satisfactory outcome. No one.
Well, I have one person in full candor, and I want to say this because Sue, do you know the Australian government had me for decades be the after-sales service for the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, CSL, and the Australian Red Cross Blood Service. I had a telephone number. When I say they got me to be it, they didn't pay me. Oh no, they didn't want me. They said this thing didn't happen. They said that Australia's deadliest medical scandal. How do we know it's the deadliest? It's a good question. How do we know? Where is it on any website? Well, what we do know is that when they were under pressure to answer questions, and the last time was before a Senate committee, they confessed that in 2004 that there were 8,000, up to 8,000 survivors of tainted blood transfusions, and that 1,750 haemophiliacs have been infected with HIV and hepatitis C. So now, of course, they're not to be trusted, it has to be said. But those numbers, even on those numbers, this is by far Australia's deadliest medical scandal, right? That's still being covered up. So this look back thing that's supposed to search for them, you know, Greg Ball just said it was more like a register for them. And here's a question I have. Okay, so they're the ones that infected us. They're the ones that lied. They're the ones that did all of these things. And they're the ones to do the search. Just a question, because I'm only a simple person. What incentive would the person that, you know, infected you and in some cases knowingly gave you a product that was tainted, what incentive would they have to find you if you would probably remonstrate or sue them?
The question remains that, in my view, a crime has been committed. It's a product negligence case. It's like Coca-Cola poisoning 20,000 people.
Yes.
The product caused the injury.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Why, in 35, 40 years, has there never been one police investigation or one legal inquiry, independent legal inquiry into this issue when tens of thousands of Australians are affected? Why is there no database somewhere recording how many people have been infected? You know, surely as a public health risk and being put on a public health register, that register should contain people with hepatitis C. So surely New South Wales Health, Victorian Health, all of the states must have some form of record when a Hep C confirmation comes up in anyone's blood work, you know.
Okay. So I felt so strongly. We used to have these meetings at Reverend Bill Cruz in Sydney at the Ashfield Uniting Church. And the classic about that was like the HQ for tainted blood victims. It's also a place where the homeless and people that just like to have a chat and lunch go to that fabulous restaurant that they have there, the Loaves and Fishes. I have to tell you something. It's in Ashfield. I have to tell you, it actually is fabulous. I walked past there for so many years, and I was so busy going this way and that way and up to things. And sometimes I didn't even have time to have a proper meal. And I just, the roasts and all of the wonderful aromas that came from the kitchen, just fantastic. But we'd have these meetings at Bill's church. And we've got some video on infectedbloodaustralia.com, the evidence they don't want you to see or didn't want you to see, I think that's called. But if you go there, you can see a meeting that I'm referring to at Bill's church, okay? And you've got parents who, their children, they found out years later that the reason their child is, messing up is because they've got Hep C or they've had Hep C and they've developed cirrhosis and they're chronically ill. They're very upset. They're very upset. And at this meeting, the Australian government, with all these victims there and parents with infected kids, the Australian government send their representative for people infected with this deadly virus, hepatitis C. Okay? And this representative chastises people in the audience because he says, I was watching a television program on the weekend, or there was something in the media, and people were referring to themselves as innocent victims. And this is in 2002, okay, in Australia. And to anyone watching internationally or anyone watching in the United Kingdom, my goodness, or in Canada, could you imagine you're a haemophiliac who was given a tainted blood product, and you know that by now, authorities knew it was tainted. And you've got these chronic conditions that you didn't ask for, and they're telling you not to say you're innocent, okay? Now, at that same meeting, at these meetings, we asked people, were you contacted by Look Back? Were you? Anyway, after the meeting, we put out a press release. We said, this Look Back doesn't work. And do you know what the Australian Red Cross did? They came out and issued a press release and said that the claims that we were making, that victims were making, were unfounded, and that Look Back was a multi-million-dollar tracing system for viruses. And this is in 2002 that they said this, multi-million-dollar. He said it had dual systems. It was multi-million. I checked, it did. Tens of millions of dollars poured in. These guys were handling so much money for this virus search, and yet everyone I ever met, never ever heard from them. What? So we were called liars by the people that were taking millions and millions of dollars to tell us that we've been infected with the virus, and yet no one ever heard from them. And now every time I go into a shop, I've got a QR code and I've got to do this. The same people that never told us about contaminated blood, the same people that allowed thousands of marriages to be destroyed because they didn't tell them that they had given a contaminated blood transfusion during childbirth, are the same people locking us down today. Extraordinary turn of events.
Well, it's plain to me that there is no justice at this point in time. There is no media outlet in this country, mainstream media outlet, will run this story. The question, therefore, is why? Are they being pressured by certain entities, business or political? You know, why isn't this story where tens of thousands of Australians are affected? If a cruise ship crashed into another cruise ship out on the ocean and 10,000, 20,000 people sunk and died, we'd have Four Corners and every other TV outlet flying over the wreckage and, you know, weeping into their microphones. But, you know, here we have 20,000 plus, who knows how many people out there who've been affected by this, and there's not one investigation, there's not one Four Corners report. There's no, interestingly enough, this is a public health issue. Hepatitis C, HIV are reportable illnesses, okay? So why haven't we seen an ad campaign that is a public service announcement saying there is the possibility that anyone that has received blood in the last X number of years may have contained hepatitis C or whatever. AIDS and HIV would certainly be a lot more prominent because of the quicker effects of it. But why was there no public health campaign to promote this? Why are people still today, the average citizen thinks that there's nothing wrong? They've never heard of this, you know. And
yeah, absolutely. So, and very importantly, HIV, they had blanket recalls for tainted blood. So what that meant was, if you had received a blood transfusion, you come in for HIV testing during that risk period, okay? And if you had a blood product like factor VIII, which was used by haemophiliacs, they would be called back in, okay, and tested, all right? Now, what happened was, this is in 1985. Now, you might remember, Sue, you and I will definitely remember, that Ita Buttrose, the current chair of Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC, was the face of Australia's AIDS campaign, the AIDS awareness campaign of the 1980s. And Ita was also a blood promoter. Here it is. Again, it looks the wrong way around. Sorry about that. I keep doing that. But it says, if giving is in your blood, please read on. You'll see a picture of Ita. There she is, a picture. And you'll see that I've highlighted a part in red there. And that's where Ita is talking about how they need more people to come in and be good because they've got to purify these haemophilia treatments and donate blood. Come in and donate blood. You go in and you donate blood plasma to the Australian Red Cross, and they'd send it to this Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, CSL. This is the makers of the AZ jab today. And these products, Ita said, in 1985 were purified. Well, 1,750 haemophiliacs ended up with hepatitis C. And how can that be when she said they were purified, right? Well, get this. This is the outrage. They had her as the face of the AIDS campaign, and they did blanket recalls for blood products that might have been exposed or compromised by HIV. But they never did a blanket recall for the Hep C compromised factor VIII blood products or the blood transfusions. And that was the more pervasive. That was the bigger thing. HIV, of course, is deadly. I'm not, no, of course. But so too is hepatitis C. And this was happening tens of thousands. HIV, there's no suggestion that HIV has infected tens of thousands in Australia through the blood supply. No one's doing that. No, it hasn't. But hepatitis C, yes. And we don't know exactly the toll. It is, ladies and gentlemen, it is Australia's deadliest medical scandal. I believe this is a criminal cover-up, and I think Sue does too. Sue, what do we do? What do you think we do to get justice? Because and things are going very badly with public health. What can we do? How can we get to do this?
I think we need the help of the public. You know, I think we really need people watching to share this story, right to their local member, right to Scott Morrison, right to Greg Hunt. Let them know that this is unacceptable. A crime has been committed. It needs to be investigated. When you knowingly infect someone with a life-threatening disease, to me, that's tantamount to attempted murder. And then when that person dies, it's a murder charge, in my view. Now, I don't understand how we can be in this situation when Canada, when they knew about this, within a very short period of time, they had an investigation and they compensated people in, I think, 96 or 97. You know, okay, they put their hand up, we've done the wrong thing, let's cop it on the chin and move on. Now, Australians are all about having a fair go. Where is the fair go for innocent victims of the contaminated blood scandal? Where is the fair go for those people infected when every time they go to have a blood test, they have the mark, you know, hepatitis C,
Yeah.
gloves come, double gloving comes out, and they sit there and have to justify the fact that they've got hepatitis C, but it was through a blood transfusion or through a blood product. You know, everyone has judged those people. If you go to work and say, I've got hepatitis C, you'll be ostracised. You know, people don't understand in that time of AIDS and bloodborne diseases, to be given the sentence, which was a death sentence, of hepatitis C,
Gotcha.
not only deal with the physical problems, you know, that was affecting your body, the emotional, mental, and social problems were far outstripping that, because it was like people were lepers. You know, you could sit down, imagine this, Charles, you're sitting down with your family at Christmas time, okay? You've got the relatives there, the brothers, the sisters, the nieces, the nephews, the grandparents, okay? One person in that family may be a 6-year-old child, it may be the mother, it may be the grandfather. One person, they've all got their beautiful Christmas spread set out on the table. One person's given plastic plate, plastic knife, plastic spoon, plastic everything. And basically, you're shown to be different because we think we can catch this. You know, you're contagious, you're less than a human being. And that effect for people for, you know, 10, 20, 30 years has been horrific. The government and all the medical people, CSL, Red Cross, you know, it's just a process of attrition. They're just waiting for every victim to die before they make any sort of move towards compensation. Now, if they had have taken up, if the Senate inquiry in 2004 had have had legal powers of investigation, not one person there did any proper investigating. For example, in that inquiry, the Red Cross said, we have a compensation scheme in place in every state. Not one person on that Senate inquiry said, show us the evidence, provide us with a copy of that compensation system that you've got set up. Let us see what you've put in place. Even today, I've contacted the Red Cross on numerous occasions. They will not supply me with a copy of their compensation protocols. They simply, which leads me to believe they don't exist. So if the Senate inquiry with so-called members representing the public, you know, on that Senate committee can't get the Red Cross to provide the evidence they say they've got, you know, the information they say they've got, and when you've got CSL Red Cross even then admitting that, yes, we did do the wrong thing, the chair of that committee comes out and says, well, compensation's really not in the interest of the victims. Where have you ever seen anyone that's been run over by a car get to court and the judge says, oh, look, you've become a quadriplegic, you know, your wife lost 2 legs and your son's, you know, he's lost an arm, but it's really not in your interest that we give you compensation.
What?
It's just bizarre.
Do you know, this global contaminated blood scandal, Sue, there were inquiries right around the world, and some didn't happen soon enough, right? Campaigners had to fight, okay? But none of them looked at this issue and said, compensation would not be in the best interest of victims. Now, what, governments love to sort of suggest, oh, well, these people are just here for money and blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. They're here to get their homes back. They're here to get their careers back, the money that's been lost. I mean, millions and millions of dollars when you lose a home today in Australia, an average home, it's a lot of money, isn't it? And careers, careers. Yeah. For me, everybody, I started young as a contaminated blood victim, so I didn't have, a long history, a career, a working career. I wasn't a professional. I was a school pupil. But I started this group. I haven't really slipped up the words there. I started this group. And the group, suddenly, I expected it to just be the odd haemophiliac people like myself, but it actually turned out to be a lot of everybody, a lot of professionals, anyone who'd been in hospital, okay, and people who had knew that they'd received blood, who were then told that they didn't receive blood when they go to this look back department. And this actually happened quite a bit. And then we have people actually of their own volition say, I don't believe that. My mum used to work for the Red Cross, and she saw me having a blood transfusion when I was having that operation. And they went and did their own investigation, and they found, lo and behold, that they were being lied to. And we found case after case after case like this. And it's just, this is all I can say is, this is the biggest scandal to anyone watching internationally or here in Australia. I will debate you if you can find a bigger medical scandal than this. Now, I'll just say this right now. People will say, oh, well, a bigger medical scandal right now is this. And do you know what? I would say this. I'd say it's a continuation. Because we have a bad culture in public health in this country, and it hasn't been addressed. And I really believe that we might not have had some of this stuff in Victoria if people had known the truth. Had the ABC done its job and told Australia about its nation's deadliest medical scandal, thousands of people who acquired hepatitis C from blood transfusions, who weren't told, spent years not knowing what was wrong with them, only to find out through failing health, count after count like this, infectedbloodaustralia.com, you'll see it there. The testimonies from victims are excerpts from Senate submissions that they still haven't published. Almost 20 years later, public submissions to a Senate investigation are not published. The only Senate inquiry to have public submissions that weren't published on the internet. Wow, what a surprise. What a cover-up. What are we to do now, Sue?
Well, I think, Charles, we have literally nothing to lose. People who've been infected and affected by contaminated blood literally, are living on borrowed time, but many have been given a second chance through the new treatment, the 12-week treatment. Now, that means that those people, once they get better and they become a little bit fitter and more competent and capable and can spend more than 2 hours a day attending to tasks, those people are going to start to improve in their health, and they're going to get angry. And their families are angry, okay? Because, as I said, the government has just been waiting for people to die out, and hopefully this will go away. Charles Mackenzie, just drop off the perch, mate. We're sick of you haggling and annoying us, and hassling and annoying us, and basically stirring the pot. Just go away and die quietly, please.
Well, they on that note, and I never do this, but I thought it just happened today because I have to back up everything that I say. But I've been getting some very bizarre. Now, I don't know if this is something that's been happening to other people, but I've been getting telephone calls where the number calls me, I pick up. They're in Australia. It's a mobile phone. I 3 telephone calls from a Newcastle number today, and then it hangs up, and the number's there, and I ring it up, and the guy answered and said, I think someone's scanning my phone. They're using my number. It wasn't me. So they're using somebody else's number, and it's ringing my phone. Okay? Now, I've had other people tell me that I'll be murdered, okay, decades ago for asking questions. I went to friends who were in the police for their advice and their support. They've been very supportive. So I enjoy good support. I'm confident that I can take care of myself, but it's still, it asks questions, what is it about this infected blood scandal? What is it about these indemnities? Why is this company, CSL, perpetually indemnified? They haven't even accounted. I mean, they've got a duty of candor under the law, okay? And Greg Ball, who's the head of Infected Blood Australia's haemophilia campaign, he wrote to this company, CSL, in good faith, okay? Now, I believe this happened last year, early 2020. And he wrote to them and said, could you tell me about these batches of this product that you made that infected myself, okay? And he's also about his brother as well, who's had to have a liver transplant, and Greg's had cancer 3 times. Well, the company replies, and they basically talk about how the contaminated blood scandal was a global problem, and they don't answer his questions. So they failed to respond to their duty of candor obligations under the law. Well, there's no recourse for us. They can just do whatever they like. They can just kick sand in our face for 35 years, and the next thing you know, they're the makers of the AZ, the AstraZeneca, and they're indemnified for that. What a charmed existence. These guys are licensed to kill. Do you understand? Something really, really bad is happening here in Australia, and if you go to our bio, you can actually support a Royal Commission, which is the only way we'll get answers. We've got to have a legal investigation, Sue.
Oh, look, it's the only way forward, unfortunately. And the pressure for a Royal Commission has to come not just from the grass and roots people. We need support from people with a profile, people perhaps in the media, someone in Parliament. You know, every politician is ducking and weaving and won't look at it. We've got no lawyers willing to really take on individual cases. We need to create some sort of, a group to, launch a class legal action perhaps. But the worrying thing is that, in my view, if you've seen what's happened in Canada, you've seen what's happened in Ireland and what's happening in England at the moment, where the admissions are there, the Australian government will be the same. They will have to admit it happened, have to compensate. Now, in my view, any lawyer worth their salt can see that in England, these guys are being paid a fortune in legal fees to represent victims at these inquiries that will eventually set up a tribunal of compensation. So those lawyers are on a bloody but they're on a gravy train.
Yeah.
And if you can't see that as an Australian lawyer, that there's a gravy train heading your way, what does that say about our legal profession, I'm afraid?
I don't know, and I don't know. All I know is that the Australians get treated badly, okay? There's something going on here. If there is a global problem, Australia gets on the arse end of it. We may be at the bottom of the earth, but there's no reason to treat us like absolute dirt. Do you know, I've seen evidence, I've got evidence that they've murdered people. Do you know that? They've murdered children. How do you think it feels to? I know they've done that. I know that they have. And I've seen the evidence. And so when you know that, it really affects you when those same public health criminals, people like Australia's Health Minister, Greg Hunt, who's completely blanked us in this issue, people like, Mark Butler, the opposition leader, who says, oh, yes, it is injustice, but I won't speak up about it in Parliament. Okay, he won't speak up when he knows that children were murdered. And he wants to be a part. Good luck with your career, Mark Butler. Mark Butler with the Labour Party. Good luck, mate. Good luck. Well, imagine voting in someone like that. I know it's injustice, kids being murdered, but I can't speak about it. Okay, great. I'm going to vote for that. Oh yeah. Who else? Have we got a jellyfish? There's ever a jellyfish running for Parliament? And Greg Hunt. Now, Greg Hunt, apparently his brother is in the science world, and I've had people messaging me about Greg Hunt's brother. Now, I don't want to get in hot water, so if anyone can send me good information about Greg Hunt and his brother, please do. We'll have it out, because I tell you this right now, my name's Charles McKenzie, and I went to a really good school. When I say a good school, what I mean is we had some really good pupils and some great values. We had some great friends, and one of those pupils lost his life as a child. And he, as he said himself, the pages of his life were just torn like from a book. All these chapters thrown away. And 4 days before he lost his life, nursing staff didn't believe him when he said he was in pain, and they denied him pain relief. Okay, so he was taken home and he passed away there. So I know that the Australian Red Cross and the makers of this blood product, Factor 8, that was given to this boy for some bruising, this treatment that he didn't even need to survive, I know that they knew that they weren't going to take the measures that everyone else needed to take to provide a safe product. They didn't want to do that because they didn't want to increase costs. They didn't want to have any, even if it was 5 cents or $1, it was too much. They said so themselves in their documents. They said so themselves. I've seen it with my own eyes, Sue. And now I've got a neurological problem. And so I don't know what that means to me. I get nausea all the time, 24/7. I have to take a lot of medicine, and it's a huge effort, a huge effort. I walk around like this all day, and maybe I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep on campaigning. But when you know that a child has been killed through criminal negligence, and that it's happened en masse, it changes your life, especially when you know that Greg Hunt, Australia's health minister, is covering it up and will not look at this. How do we've got to get that man into court. And so if anyone watching this tonight, if you support Infected Blood Australia, and Sue's here helping us, we've got great people in our group. And Sue, the clock's about to run out soon. We've got 4 minutes. But I'm just saying this, Sue, if you go to the bio, if you support our call for a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Australian Red Cross CSL blood scandal, and it will draw out the fact that we've got health ministers, people that we choose, our leaders. Do we really want someone with those sorts of values? Is anyone a parent watching? Do you want someone in charge of your children's health future who covers up criminal negligence involving the death of children or the murder of children? Do you want that? We don't want that. I know that Australia doesn't want that. I do. And I know there's a lot of people who support us who are very against child abuse. I thought after the Royal Commission into the institution's lack of response for child sex abuse, I thought we would have turned a corner with people doing something when they know that children are knowingly harmed. And here we are in 2021 with Greg Hunt not acting on evidence that children with haemophilia were knowingly given contaminated blood products. And here he is inviting Pfizer and other jab makers to come and inject potentially 5 to 12-year-olds. That's the health minister, the one that's covering up Australia's deadliest medical scandal. Sue, would you close for us tonight?
Well, I think, Charles, that there's the old saying that doctors bury their mistakes. Now, in the case of contaminated blood and the thousands upon thousands of Australians who have been infected by that contaminated blood knowingly and negligently, I think we can safely say that not only do doctors bury their mistakes, the government, CSL and the Red Cross annihilate their mistakes. There is nothing less than that. They just annihilate anybody who comes up against them. There's a blank wall. There's no help. There's no assistance. Go away, die a painful death, and let's just keep giving our CEO $60 million bonus every year. Yeah. Don't bother us with this issue. We're beyond that. We're past that. We've got $140 billion company to run. Go away and die.
Killing kids. Yeah, they've got a $140 billion company. They murdered children. They knowingly delivered a contaminated treatment that children did not even need, some of them, to survive. And they lied to parents. And the chair of the ABC, Ita Buttrose, said in a print advertisement from 1985, parents believed her, that the treatments had been purified. Imagine that. You're a parent and you make that decision for your kid because of Ita, chair of the ABC. Sue, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you watching tonight. We've got 1 minute to go. And thank you, Sue. It's great to have you here tonight. I hope you can come back as often as you can because you speak so well. Our country's in such distress at the moment. So it's actually been reassuring for me to have you here talking to us because to hear an actual voice of reason. Yes.
Let's hope we get justice, Charles, because the victims well and truly deserve it, as do their families.
And, as does Australia, because, if we do have public servants or health ministers that are covering up the knowing harm of patients, come on, we don't want that, do we? Do we want a terrorist for a Qantas pilot? Do we want a criminal for a policeman? do we, you know, it doesn't make sense. So let's do the right thing. Let's get together now. This is the moment, Australia. This is the closest we'll get Greg Hutt to this cause. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so,
See you next time.
bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.